Little Joan, tiny little Joan in the bottom of the screen. Hi. Here's Tony D and Little Joan with a hot take on how the Joe Biden administration continues to fail us all. Transgender alleged oath keeper charged in Capitol riot was left naked in a cell, lawyers claim. Jessica Watkins was mistreated after going on a hunger strike, according to court filing. This is from Just the News. Attorney for a transgender woman charged in connection with the January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol say that their client voted for Barack Obama and has been mistreated in jail, according to a weekend court filing. Quote, Miss Watkins was left naked in a jail cell with lights on 24 hours a day for 4 days in full view of everyone else, lawyers for Jessica Watkins wrote in a Saturday filing. I told you yesterday, if you're trans, be warned. The Biden administration is using you. They don't actually care about you like everybody else. Politicians use people in order to create a shield around them to do what they want, to power grab. So while we're all arguing over, hey, you ruined women's sports, and now you got high school girls and guys mixing it up in the locker room, you might think that the Biden administration is just well-meaning people who seriously want to help trans people. Nope. See, Miss Watkins has the wrong politics. It doesn't matter that she's trans. She has wrong think. Since she's an oath keeper, since she crossed the line, they're happy to do to her what they did to Chelsea Manning. Basically torture her. I mean, this is torture. You put somebody naked in a cell for 4 days with the lights on, 24/7? What the hell are you doing? This isn't Gitmo. This isn't a military jail. This is a real jail. She wasn't arrested for murder. She was arrested for breaching the White House. I guarantee you, those hippie Weather Underground types who bombed the Capitol back in '83 got a nice comfy cell. I bet they weren't sitting naked in there. I bet the woman who now runs some fundraising for BLM and was pardoned by Bill Clinton, I bet she wasn't sitting naked in a cell. No. But here's a transgender woman being mistreated. Where's the outrage? Where are the lefties that scream, oh my God, a marginalized person is being mistreated? Well, they're nowhere to be found. Haven't heard this mentioned before today. They're nowhere to be found. If this was a transgender woman who had been arrested during a BLM riot and was treated like this during the Trump administration, this would be 24/7 coverage on CNN. This would be people demanding at the New York Times that she be released, that there'd be a lawsuit. Every major network would be screaming to free her. And yet, I bet this is the first time you're hearing about this too. What is this? It's hypocrisy. The Biden administration doesn't care one whit about trans people. Not one. They're using trans people as a shield. Oh, you disagree with our policies? You're a transphobic bigot. But wait a minute. Not all your policies are about trans people. Shut up, bigot. You're part of those Trump supporters, I'll bet. You bunch of conspiracy theorists. It's all about demonizing the other side. They don't care about what they do as long as they have the power. And now they have it. And here's how they treat you. You have the wrong policies, F you. There's equal treatment under the law, right? It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace that anyone would be treated like this in jail. 4 days naked with the lights on? What the hell are they doing over there in D.C.? Poll, China covering up, not cooperating with beer virus or origin probe. Voters say by 5-1 ratio. Also from Just the News. Poll finding comes even as World Health Organization team investigating origins of pandemic rejected as very unlikely a widely held surmise that the virus escaped from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yeah, it's just probably a coinkydink that the lab in Wuhan that handles really contagious and dangerous viruses just happened to be at the epicenter of a really contagious virus that went worldwide and killed millions of people. Crazy how that happens. From the Post-Millennial, Judge Merrick Garland refuses to commit to releasing the report on the Trump-Russia investigation origins. This guy is going to be Biden's Attorney General. And he's going to be probably more partisan than even Obama's Attorney General. He's probably not going to release this report, is what it boils down to. They're probably holding it, and you're never going to see it. Well, maybe after Biden's out of office, and Kamala Harris, maybe after this guy's gone. He'll run the whole 4 years. I'm sure he'll be very subservient to the Biden team. But yeah, he sounds like he's going to be a terrible nominee. And the worst part is a lot of the Republicans will probably approve him. But this is probably the biggest story. The Uyghurs and the genocide happening in China. This is from the Lotus Eaters. Trudeau urged to label Uyghur persecution genocide in the wake of recent UK ruling. And I got to hand it to the Canadian Conservatives for at least proposing it. Trudeau, surprisingly, isn't outright rejecting it. He's kind of waffling about it. So it seems like Trudeau is kind of like, do I do this? Do I not do this? Yeah, I mean, as soon as the woke get a hold of this story and finally get on board with it, he'll be on board with it. He'll be on board. That's what we really need to do. We need to focus the rage of the woke against the Chinese communists. It's going to be tough because a lot of the woke are communists. And they really don't want to do that. But perhaps if we could show them how incredibly racist the CCP is and how incredibly horrific the genocide is, maybe they'd sign on to it, at least in some other countries. I don't know about the United States. They're so deeply ignorant here on certain issues. I mean, the Uyghur stuff, it's barely a whisper. Barely. I don't know about Canada, though. We'll see what happens. But I just thought it was interesting that, this gets some play in the Canadian government at all. So good on you, Canadian Conservatives. The Supreme Court will allow the subpoena of Trump's tax returns. But they won't hear another case, which I can't talk about on YouTube. Honk, honk, wink, wink. It's a case in Pennsylvania, just to give you a little hint. So, investigating Trump forever and ever, good. Investigating something important like what happened in Pennsylvania, bad. Clarence Thomas, much to his credit, wrote a fairly blistering dissenting opinion. A lot of people called it blistering, scathing. It was disagreeable, I'll say. I didn't think it was all that scathing, but pretty good. And, I was never a fan of his, but now he seems to be like the Anton Scalia of the court. And forget about Kavanaugh and Barrett. I mean, they're nowhere to be found. Looks like Trump's appointees weren't as right-wing as he thought. They don't seem to care. And they're just throwing them to the wolves. Just throwing them right to the wolves. Now, maybe it's the sort of thing where they say, well, we can't look like we're helping Trump, so we have to, do this. Still, though, they're supposed to be above all that. They're supposed to make legal judgments apart from that. And they don't seem to be doing that. So, and not much more. Here's Biden reading his first major penalties on Russia. Because as we all know, the world is such a better place when we antagonize the world's other superpower or former superpower rather than trying to, make peace and trade with them. The Trump administration had prepared a sanctions package in response to the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, but Biden's national security team wants to chart its own course. The U.S. was preparing to respond to Russia's poisoning and jailing of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and is expected to coordinate a sanctions rollout with European allies in the coming weeks, according to people familiar with the matter. The response would mark a break with the previous administration, which prepared a sanctions package following Navalny's poisoning but never implemented, the people say. It would also constitute the new administration's first major step in holding Russia accountable for human rights abuses, which Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken have listed as a key pillar in their foreign policy agenda. Oh, that's weird. I thought it was just a different cultural norm. It's so weird that they're enforcing the rules against the Russian Federation, but against the communist Chinese, oh, well, that's just a cultural norm. See, when the Russians do it, they're a-holes. When the Chinese do it, it's like, uh-oh, spaghetti-o. I guess we'll just have to chalk that one up to cultural misunderstanding. And there's no reason for that. I mean, let's be honest, the Bidens took bribes from Russia and China. But let's be honest, the China bribes were much, much sweeter. Many more stacks from China. Russia had a few stacks thrown their way. But China, their stacks went to the ceiling. And it was 10% for the big guy. Probably 100% for the big guy in Russia. But who knows which Russians gave them that money. Because, see, as a federation, it's more open than the Communist Party. The Communist Party, that money can only come from the communists. There's nobody else where it could come from. But in Russia, well, that could have been a lot of different people, including the opposition to Vladimir Putin, or one of them, or perhaps the oligarchs, perhaps Russian organized crime. But as long as Biden gets his stacks, that's all that matters, right? Because, as I've always said, Biden doesn't care. He doesn't care about transgender people, doesn't care about the Russians, doesn't care about the Chinese. Just cares about Joe Biden. And the words that come out of his mouth don't matter. He'll say whatever he needs to say. There's two kinds of people in Washington. There are people who are true believers, right? Because when you run for office or when you garner any little bit amount of fame, I have a little bit of fame, and I have some followers, a few people who think I'm awesome. And I would never, ever do anything to betray them or hurt them or manipulate them. I just wouldn't do that. I'd feel awful if something happened or they lost money or time or whatever. But see, politicians, they're happy to bring you on board, right? Make you part of the team. And you work your butt off so they get elected. You volunteer. Maybe you get paid down the road. Maybe if you're really lucky, you get made the staff as a reward. But see, they're really using you. And there's a fine line between someone who volunteers for a politician they really believe in and get used by them. But that's the only kind of people in Washington other than the politicians themselves. So you either get used or use in Washington. The Bidens are all users. They use people. Because what else are they going to do with you? They're not here to be equal to you. I told you yesterday. Equity? For you. For me. For the peasants. They all get the same amount of crumbs. But for Joe Biden and his family, no, they don't live on crumbs. They live on stacks. And that's the way Washington works.